here in Manga and Comics Chronicles. Without knowing that she was about to meet Nosferatu in person, who would turn her life upside down, this story begins with a lonely girl named Ellen Hodder, who was crying out for someone, anyone, even a cosmic or divine entity, to hear her call and keep her company. And it's as if something magical happened. A ghostly voice responds to her. "Come to me, you have awakened me from the eternal darkness. You are not for the living, you are different." The scene cuts, and we see Ellen years later, revealing that she is now engaged to a man named Thomas, who works in a real estate agency, where he is actually expecting a significant raise. But for that, he had to do a very special job. Upon arriving at the office, he is greeted by his boss, a man named Herno, who informs him that he recently crossed paths with a foreign count from a very ancient and eccentric lineage, who wishes to acquire a house in the city, that is, in Whisper, Germany. Herno has already selected a mansion for the man. The only detail is that he is too ill to travel, so he requested that someone from the agency go to his land to meet him in person. The stranger lives in a territory to the east of Bohemia, in a place called Transylvania, to be more precise, and the name of this mysterious buyer is Count Orlok. Without wasting any time, Thomas goes back home and tells Ellen that he has to travel to close the deal. News that Ellen takes very badly because, for some time now, the nightmares, like the one we saw at the beginning, have been increasing, and now that her beloved will be away, she knows it will be even worse at night. That evening, the couple goes to a gathering at the Hardy family's house, where their friend Frederick talks about various topics, while Ellen plays with the man's daughters and is observed by Anna, the girl's mother. The couple spends a night at the house, and to make sure Thomas doesn't forget her, he cuts a lock of his hair and puts it in a pendant. Meanwhile, we see Hernot performing some sort of ritual while shouting, "I will serve him from here, my lord," near the object of his contract. "Everything will be done according to your plans." In the morning, Thomas grabs his belongings, his horse, and after leaving Ellen in the care of the Hardy family, he embarks on his beautiful, totally non-paranormal adventure. After riding for a while, he finds a small village where he asks for accommodation, which is one of his first mistakes. This is because, despite the locals warning him to leave and stay away from Count Orlok, he ignores them and offers double the money to stay. Once inside, an old woman approaches him to warn him to be careful of Orlok's shadow, as it has the power to control your mind, making you believe that you are living in reality, but that everything will be an illusion. As if that wasn't enough, in the early morning, he sees how a group of people take a virgin girl riding a horse to a certain part of the forest. There, after realizing that the horse refuses to step on a particular grave, something that would indicate that a vampire had been buried there, according to the legend, they proceed to stab the creature in the chest with a huge steel rod, leaving Thomas with more questions than answers. In the morning, Thomas wakes up to find the inn empty, and his horse seems to have vanished or been stolen. It doesn't matter. With no other options, Thomas continues on foot towards his destination, Orlok's castle. Just when he was about to give up, a mysterious carriage appears on the road, and almost hypnotically, it moves towards him. In the blink of an eye, Thomas finds himself at the gates of Count Orlok's castle. Without wasting any time, Thomas is taken into the castle's hall, guided by a silhouette with a suspicious appearance, moving in an unusually fast manner. The mere presence of this entity, along with its commanding voice and the imposing look of its dwelling, makes Thomas barely able to speak when he tries to engage in conversation. Count Orlok introduces himself and quickly asks to see the real estate papers. This is the moment when Thomas seizes the opportunity to ask why Orlok wants to move. This is when Orlok drops a very important piece of information. He mentions that the people in the surrounding area still had customs and rituals that didn't suit him, referring to the gypsies at the inn. Therefore, it is necessary for him to move to a more modern place where people are ignorant and have no pagan customs. Oh yes, my friends, Orlok was afraid that the gypsies would bring an end to his existence. The most important part comes when, fulfilling the old woman's prophecies from the inn, Thomas begins to experience a kind of confusion that grows heavier and heavier, reaching the point where he seems to disconnect from himself for several minutes. When he comes to, he realizes several things have happened, like the fact that he is now signing the property contract as a seller. After several trance-like moments, Thomas wakes up on the floor in the morning. While wandering through the castle looking for an exit, he realizes a terrifying truth. A large bite mark on his chest sticks out from his shirt, and that's when he realizes that Orlok is not a normal person. It's here that he remembers that just the night before, Orlok had requested the pendant with a lock of hair Ellen had given him so he wouldn't forget her. And in fact, Nosferatu hadn't even returned it. Continuing his journey through the place, Thomas finds the only door that seems easy to open, and after removing a bar that was used as a lock, he enters a kind of catacomb where a huge sarcophagus lies in the middle of the room. Seeking answers, Thomas opens the sarcophagus, and surprise, Orlok is resting inside, looking quite unhealthy. Without a second thought, the man tries to kill him, but he can't because the vampire wakes up at that instant and corners him in a room, where he proceeds to feed on him once again. Meanwhile, Ellen begins to experience a series of unexplained epileptic seizures. Concerned, a man named Dr. Wilhelm recommends sedating her to prevent something worse from happening. Thomas manages to wake up in the early morning and, without thinking twice, escapes from the castle through a window. He is found by a group of nuns, who immediately recognize that he has been attacked by Nosferatu. They advise him not to leave the house of God, as it is a place where the creature cannot come near. On the other hand, the staff at the hospital where Dr. Wilhelm works find a completely insane man who, in fact, has been eating raw animals from the market without hesitation. Without thinking, they lock him up. To their surprise, they later discover that this man is none other than Herno, who, completely out of his mind due to Orlok's influence, begins to mutter things like, "He's coming," "He is the answer," and similar phrases, trying to find a solution. Ellen's illness. To address Ellen's condition, Dr. Wilhelm talks about a man who was once his professor at university, the brightest person he ever met, but with one problem. He was expelled from the faculty due to his supernatural research. With nothing to lose, Dr. Wilhelm and Frederick decide to visit the professor, revealing that he is none other than Professor Bonfrance. Meanwhile, Count Orlok is aboard a ship sailing toward his new home. Thomas also begins his journey back home, taking a horse from the church. Professor Bonfrance visits Ellen and, without wasting any time, asks her what's wrong. This is the moment for important revelations. Ellen explains how, since she was a child, she had the ability to know what her Christmas gifts would be without even opening them. She knew her mother would lose her life and many other things due to these abilities. Because of this, people avoided being around her, and she slowly became more and more isolated, until she cried out for someone to keep her company. As we saw at the beginning, it was then that this entity known as Orlok awakened, and for years, he never left her alone. This only stopped when Ellen met Thomas. Once Ellen enters a trance, Bonfrance forces her to speak using a special talisman, and some words whose meaning is unknown to me. But it's thanks to this that the professor arrives at a terrible conclusion. Bonfrance is sure that there's a kind of cosmic connection he cannot explain, but it is this connection that gives her these abilities. Abilities that made her connect with an inexplicable entity now obsessed with her. This means they cannot waste time if they want to stop the situation. On the ship where Orlok is being transported, things are also going terribly wrong. Some of the crew members begin to succumb to the plague, which is being spread by the rats that are constantly around Orlok. Others are falling for other reasons. By deceiving a guard, Herno manages to escape from his prison. Meanwhile, Thomas arrives home, and the ship carrying Orlok crashes onto the coast of the city, releasing the rats with their pestilence. Herno manages to get a hold of Orlok's coffin and takes it to his new house. Once there, the Count prepares the second phase of his plan. Dr. Bonfrance, intrigued by the plague, the rats, the ship, Herno's escape, and all of that, concludes that they are dealing with a Nosferatu, a word that means vampire in Romanian. So, it's imperative they find a solution immediately. At night, Ellen wakes up almost sleepwalking, realizing that Orlok has come to visit her. An interesting conversation takes place here, where the Count reveals that for centuries, he was a creature trapped at the bottom of a well. But Ellen, through sorcery, managed to awaken him, and now he is bound to her. The Count also reveals that Thomas has already signed the contract, giving Ellen to him, and now it's only a matter of her accepting it voluntarily. To put pressure on her, he gives her only 3 days, and for each day that passes, things will get worse. The Nosferatu's promise proves to be true when the rats attack Anna Harding, making her sick quickly. This pushes Frederick over the edge, and without hesitation, he throws Ellen and Thomas out of his house. Meanwhile, Bonfrance and Wilhelm head straight to Herno's real estate office, where the discovery and final confrontation. They discover that Herno used magic to establish contact with Orlok, and also helped him execute his plan to take Ellen. The doctors try to explain this discovery to Frederick, revealing that one way to end Nosferatu's reign is to return him to the land where he was buried before dawn. However, Frederick is so worried about his wife that he ignores their advice, focusing only on finding solutions. Meanwhile, Von Franz starts analyzing the Solomon Hari book found in Herno's house. He comes across an interesting passage that reads, "And here is the beautiful maiden who offered her love to the beast and bound herself to him. Until the first crow, her voluntary sacrifice broke the curse and freed them from the plague of Nosferatu." This gives them 2 methods to try to deal with the creature. At the Harding family's house, things are not going well either. In the middle of the night, Nosferatu pays them a quick visit, killing the daughters of the couple and Anna, leaving Frederick devastated. Despite this, the group convinces Frederick to join them to hear the plan, revealing they will go to the Count's house before sunset. While he sleeps, they'll drive a large stake into him and then return him to the land where he belongs. However, this was the secondary plan, because Ellen was already aware, thanks to her powers, that the real plan was for her to surrender to Orlok and force him to be exposed to the sunlight. Meanwhile, Frederick, consumed by his emotions, visits the graves of his daughters and his wife. Due to his infection with the plague, he ends up dying at the gravesite. The group finally reaches Orlok's quarters and approaches the sarcophagus. As soon as they open it, they discover that it isn't Orlok, it's Herno. It's at this moment that Thomas realizes it was all part of a hidden plan for something else. Without wasting any time, they rush back to the house, while Dr. Bonfrance burns the whole place down. This is the moment when Orlok finally gets to be alone with Ellen. Not only does he slowly drain her blood, but they also have direct contact. They do so for so long that the sun rises from the horizon, hitting the vampire directly and finally ending the nightmare. By the time Thomas arrives, Ellen is on the brink of death, having completed her purpose in life and putting an end to the terror of Nosferatu, closing the story. What a story! I got really excited about it. What an epic ending. What a great story. Friends, I really liked it a lot. I don't think it's a movie for everyone because it's quite slow, and even though it falls under the horror category, personally, it never scared me, not even a little. However, I was intrigued by how everything was going to be resolved. But let me know what you think in the comments. I've shared a story with you. Now you share your thoughts on today's story. Remember to subscribe to the channel so I can share more stories like this with you here on Manga and Comics Chronicles. See you next time.